Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating some French country home decor. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this little plastic tray that I thrifted, and I'm going to be priming it with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to be doing 2 coats. The primer is going to prepare the surface for the paint so that it sticks well, and it's also going to block that silver from coming up through underneath. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint, and I'm going to be applying another 2 coats over the top of my primer. And this is a chalk paint, so I am going to end up having to seal it. I'm also being mindful and trying not to get much paint on the underside of my tray either. I'm planning on cleaning it off and leaving the back just a plain black. When that was dry, I took out IOD's Pastoral Toile stamp. Now this is a first generation stamp that I was lucky enough to find. I've been searching for so long and I just had to take it out and use it. It has a lot of beautiful designs. I'm going to be using the lovely woman with the sheep for my project. I'm going to be using IOD's China Blue ink. I have my stamp on a little plastic sheet. I'm then going to position it in the center of my tray and press down. So I've always got one hand holding that stamp in place while the other hand moves around and applies pressure. You really want to try not to shift that stamp, and then you want to lift it straight up. I then took out IOD's Reverie stamp, so this is one that you should be able to get at your IOD stockists, and I am going to be using some of the beautiful delicate greenery or vine style designs here. So I'm just inking one of those up with some China Blue ink as well, and I'm going to position that in the corners. So my inspiration for this piece was transferware. I really love the delicate floral borders that you often find on transferware pieces. So I'm just going to add that stamp, and then I'm going to add the mirror image version of that that's in the Reverie pack. Down in the left hand corner, and then I'm going to be repeating the same process on the right hand side. For this particular step, I did not use any plastic backing on my stamps because it would have been a bit too tricky for me to get into those tight areas. I then inked up another smaller version of the ones we just used from that same Reverie stamp pad, and I am just doing that up the top, flipping it around, and also doing it down the bottom. I let that dry and then took out IOD's Dainty Flourishes mold. I've already dusted the design I want to use with cornstarch, and now I'm working my Das air dry clay into one of the more delicate thin designs from that mold. I'm then going to flex the mold, and then I'm going to flip that over and pull it back. And I'm just very much taking my time with this one. As I said, it is quite delicate. So I'm going to be casting that one, and then I'm going to be casting the mirror image version of that as well. And I'm going to end up casting 2 of each of those for the top and bottom sections. And here you can see I'm using my Celia's Quickset wood glue to start gluing those in place up the top and down the bottom. I then decided I would go in and cast another 2 of each of the molds, but I am going to be adapting this design. I'm going to use my palette knife to cut off part of that casting on an angle, and then I'm going to repeat the same process for the mirror image style design, cutting part of that off. And as you can see here, I am going to have those 2 meet. So I've just adapted it a little bit, and I'm really curving those molds. That's the beauty of working with clay. And I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. So just remember that you can adapt your molds to suit your project. Once I was happy with the configuration, I went in and glued those pieces down as well. Just as a side note, if you don't have the Pastoral Toile stamp, you could use the La Campagne stamp by IOD in the center instead. I have done a previous video where I used this on another tray. I let my castings dry for several hours, and then I came back in with that same Simply White chalk paint over the top to have the same color on the molds as I have on the tray. Now, I probably would have done it in a different order and perhaps added the molds after doing the primer and then add my chalk paint, but the project evolved as I went, so I ended up doing my steps a little bit out of order this time. When my paint was dry, I took out Pentart's Fine Line Crackle Varnish Step 1, and I am going to be adding this over the entire tray. I'm not going to be going over the top of the castings, but I am going to be adding it around the outside areas around the castings. So I'm just going to go in and apply an even coat of that Step 1. And then I'm going to allow that to dry completely, and I'm going to take out Fine Line Crackle Step 2 and just repeat that same process. Now I find that Step 2 has got that amber color, and if you go too heavy with it, sometimes you can get that sort of discoloration. So I was just very mindful of this as I was applying it. This time when I'd finished applying it, I did use my hairdryer to speed up that drying process. I do find that this has a better likelihood of producing some really lovely cracks. I then took out Pentart's Antiquing Paste. Now this is Umber, and I'm using a paper towel to apply it over the top. So I'm using sort of like a swirling motion to try and really work it into all of the cracks. And I am also going to just be working in sections just to make sure that I can pull back as much as I want. Now I do still want this to have an antiqued look, so I am going to allow some of that paste to sort of be a bit more prominent, but I'm just using a clean paper towel now to pull some of that back, and then I'm going to continue to work my way around the tray, repeating that same process of applying the paste and then wiping some of it back. I did also then switch to using a brush for some of the smaller, more trickier areas around the molds, and I found that this definitely helped. I'm also having the paste go up onto my molds as well, so I'm using that to highlight the beautiful details of those, and I'm pulling back some of the excess with a clean paper towel from them as well. Once the paste was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Lux Metallic. I'm going to be applying that with a flat brush, specifically focusing on the Dainty Flourishes castings. I'm not going for full coverage on these. I do want it to look like maybe there was sort of gold gilding at one stage and it's worn away. And I'm just going to continue to work my way around applying that, and I did only end up doing one coat. Now I did pick bronze. I tend to prefer that nowadays, but gold would definitely look lovely, or silver, really just any sort of color that would suit your home decor. And here's a look at our finished Toile tray. I love how this turned out. I absolutely love that stamp. It goes beautifully with the Reverie stamp and the Dainty Flourishes mold. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my next project, I'm going to be working on this little wooden panel that I bought. It is a craft piece that I thrifted, and I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Angel Eyes mineral paint. I'm just going straight in over the top of that MDF, and I ended up doing 2 coats. This piece was really a great find. It was actually meant to be a key holder kit anyway, I believe, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit similar to that with it, but it already had some sort of small holes there already, but the mineral paint is so thick that it did actually fill in those holes really nicely that I didn't really think that they were noticeable at all. So I'm painting over the whole thing. I'm also going to go around the edges, and this paint has a built-in sealer as well, so that's going to be saving me a step. When my 2 coats of paint were dry, I took out the same Pastoral Toile stamp. This time I am using IOD Stone Grey ink, and I'm positioning one of the designs in the center, pressing that down. I do have it on a plastic backing, and I'm just moving my hands around to apply pressure and pulling that away. I'm then going to use one of the other stamps from that same pack. This time I'm only going to use part of it. Has a little boy and a dog and a bird in that one. And then for the other one on the right hand side, I'm going to use another part of the Pastoral Toile stamp, but this time just having the little sheep. So basically what I'm doing here is sort of mapping out my design. because I want to create a toile style that I've seen on some fabric before. So I'm going in here now and I'm actually going to pull some of that ink back. I find IOD ink wipes back quite nicely, plus I do have that built-in sealer in my paint, which is very handy, but I'm pulling some of that back because I'm going to paint over the top of it. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint, and I'm going to be using the stamped images as a guide, and I'm going to be painting a white background for the same images to then sit back over the top of later. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to go in with a small artist brush, and just anywhere that I see the stamped design, I'm applying white paint. I'm using quite soft brush strokes, almost cloud-like, and I ended up doing 3 coats to make sure that it was as opaque as I wanted. And really, I was just mindful of not going too far outside of the stamped image, but not too worried if I did, because I have got my paint sealed. Well, it's got a built-in top coat in it, so I can use a wet wipe to pull back any of that white chalk paint that's in areas that I don't want. So again, I'm just going around painting over the top of the stamped image. I did that 3 times. I let it dry, and now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to stamp the same images over the top of our now white backgrounds. I'm also using a wet wipe to pull some of that ink back, just to sort of soften the image a little bit, and I'm going to repeat the same process for each of those stamped images. As I mentioned previously, this look was inspired by an image I saw on Pinterest of some toile fabric where they had the coloured background but then the white behind the toile design, and I just absolutely loved it and wondered if I could recreate it, and I think I have managed to do that. I'll definitely be experimenting with more colours in the future. So I'm just going to wipe back the ink from that final image there, and I did end up heat setting my ink in between each session after I pulled it back, but here I didn't quite like the blue peeking through under the cow's little nose there and a few other areas, so I'm just dabbing some more white back in. I then grabbed another one of the stamps from the Pastoral Toile stamp design, and I'm just going to add that up the top and down the bottom. I just felt like it looked a little bit bare there, so I'm going to add that in and repeat the same process as before. I'm wiping back some of that stone grey ink, and then I'm going to go in and add that white painted background over the top of that stamped shape. As I mentioned previous, I think you could definitely recreate something like this using the La Campagne or even Rural Scenes stamp by IOD as well. So when my paint was dry, I layered back in over the top of my white with that same stamp using the stone grey ink. And I repeated the same process for the top and the bottom. And again, I'm using that wet wipe to pull some of it back to have that a little bit more of a faded look. When that was dry, I used my hairdryer to heat set the ink for about 2 minutes. And then I came in and decided that I would actually paint the border with that same Simply White chalk paint. I wasn't going to, but in the end I decided that it would be quite nice to actually frame out our little toile design with a white border. So I'm going to go around, and I ended up doing 2 coats around the outside of that border. If you've been watching me for a while, you will know that I really adore toile. Let me know in the comments if you are the same, if you are a big fan of the toile design. When my 2 coats of chalk paint were completely dry, I took out Paint Couture's Extreme Garden Satin. I'm going to use that to seal the white chalk paint that I added behind each of the stamped images, and of course our white border. I prefer to use clear coats when I'm sealing my projects, but you could definitely use a water-based wax as well to seal this kind of project. When the clear coat was dry, I took out some hooks that I had in my stash. You could probably find these on Amazon or eBay. And here I'm just working out the placement of where I want the hooks to go. And then I'm going to pre-drill some holes for the screws that have to go in to hold the hooks. and I'm going to continue until I have those 2 hooks attached. So I think this would look very sweet near a front door or perhaps a bedroom, and it was a really easy way to update and customize a craft blank. And here's a look at our finished wall hook project. I am so pleased with how this turned out and so relieved that my experiment worked. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be working on this beautiful little ceramic pot. It wasn't marked or anything like that. I'm going to be using my White Night clear coat to just sort of prime it a little bit. And then I'm going to be using my Redesign Chantel mould. I've dusted it with cornstarch, and now I'm working my DAS air dry clay into this beautiful design. Now my planter was already gorgeous, but it wasn't my taste, my color that I was after, and I wanted a little bit more detail in terms of mold. So I felt like adding this Chantel mold would be perfect. So I'm just flexing that mold, and then I'm going to be flipping it over and pulling that mold back to release my casting. I'm then going to be using my Sealy's Quickset wood glue on the back, and then I'm going to be using my finger to spread that out to make sure I've got really good coverage. I need this to stick really well to my surface. I'm then going to lay the planter on its back and then start gluing things down. I did have a couple of little bits break off. That's okay, very easy to just reposition that. And then I'm going to gently press and mold my casting to the surface. When that was dry, I took out my salt wash texture additive. I'm going to be adding it to some brown paint. That's actually a custom mix of 2 parts pine cone, 1 part pitch black. And I'm going to stir in that salt wash really well. It's going to thicken up my paint so that I can create some fun texture. Next, I'm going to start applying the salt wash using a chip brush to my surface. As I said before, I did use a spray sealer to apply over the top of my planter to act as like a primer. I didn't see the point in coming in with a white primer when I knew I was going to be coming in with this dark brown tone. So I'm just going in, I'm being gentle over my castings. They do have a crust, but I do still need to be gentle. And I'm going to add in a little bit more salt wash just to thicken it up even more. I wasn't quite getting the texture that I wanted, and I'm just going to continue to work my way around and add that paint. Now I did not put any on the inside. I felt like I would sort of copy the way that this had been painted originally and have the color on the outside and obviously on the bottom as well. I only ended up needing to do 1 coat of this, and I did end up going in and doing quite a bit of dabbing and stippling to create the texture that I wanted. When that was dry, I took out my bronze Lux Metallic, and I'm going to go over the top with my sort of tapered tip brush there, really working it into all of those details. However, I am going to allow some of that brown to peek through so that it almost looks like rust or age, and like perhaps this is a painted cast iron planter. Now this is actually for my home, and I just thought it would be lovely to keep it simple, just have that beautiful bronze color and let the color come in the shape of flowers. And by keeping it this sort of more neutral metallic tone, I can really experiment with the types of flowers I put in there. And here's a look at our finished planter. This was a quick and easy flip, but definitely effective. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can use molds and stamps to create French country home decor for your home. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find a full product list and my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for watching.